Well, guys and gals, looks like you better lace up your boots and get your war faces on because they are bringing back the draft.
One age-old issue is re-emerging, whether the U.S. should have a military draft.
The military draft coming back, according to one expert.
With Ukraine and Russia, Israel being attacked brutally by Hamas back on October 7th, and of course China.
It's becoming a national security issue, the military not reaching recruitment goals to refill the ranks.
Trump orbiters are musing about the possibility of mandatory military service should the former president and Republican presidential nominee get elected for another term.
If you have been active on social media or you've been paying attention even a little bit to the news, you probably will have noticed that a lot of talk has been circled around the draft coming back in 2025. And that's mainly because it's a very clickbaity topic, all right? I mean, you obviously clicked on this video, whether you're a loyal subscriber or not. You saw the title and you thought it was going to be interesting enough to click on it and see what it's all about. But I'm here to dispel those rumors for you so that you have the down and dirty truth of what's really going on. House passes bill to automatically register young men for the draft. The House passed a large defense bill Friday evening that included a provision that would automatically enroll young men between the ages of 18 and 26 for the Selective Service. The House's version of the National Defense Authorization Act, or the NDAA, which would authorize $895 billion in military spending, which is, I think, almost $10 billion more than last year's NDAA, passed by a vote of 217 to 199. It's unlikely to be picked up by the Democratic-controlled Senate because of numerous amendments regarding abortion, diversity efforts, and transgender medical treatments. We talked about that on my last video, where I do believe that they are trying to cut these programs in order to find money to be able to pay the junior enlisted troops more. The Selective Service provision, though, is part of an enduring bipartisan effort to keep the framework for military conscription in place, even though the draft ended in 1975. Automatic registration would replace the coming-of-age tradition that all 18-year-old male U.S. citizens experience when they get a card in the mail from Uncle Sam informing them that they are required under threat of criminal penalties to register for the Selective Service. And that's been true for a long time, guys. I think it's been roughly 50 years. Don't quote me on that. I want to say it's been around 50 years where that has been the reality, okay? Whether you knew that or not, once you turned 18 and if you were male in the United States, you were supposed to register for the Selective Service, which is essentially the draft system. And if you didn't do that, there's technically criminal penalties for not doing it. And I think that's where a lot of confusion on this topic is coming from. I think there's a lot of people out there that didn't realize that the Selective Service System was actually something that already existed, nor do I think that they knew that they were already required to register for it. The House's version of the 2025 National Defense Authorization Act does say that males aged 18 to 26 will be automatically enrolled into Selective Service. But that was something that you were supposed to be doing anyway. And the House's reasoning for doing this, to make it automatic, is to make it easier on the citizens and also to save money with marketing and sending out reminders to actually register for the Selective Service System. They anticipate saving a lot of money on that by just making it automatic. So not really a big deal if you really think about it. In fact, it just kind of makes things a little easier. I mean, if you're really mad about being registered for the Selective Service System, that's something you should have been mad about a long time ago. Now, another big point of contention out there that I know is sparking just tons of controversy, and I'm sure there'll be plenty of you in the comments section that talk about this once I bring it up, is that there was also a proposal by the House in the NDAA executive summary that states that there should be registration for women. So now women are held to the same standard. They also are required to register for the Selective Service System and would also be enrolled automatically, along with the men, ages 18 to 26. And the Republican-controlled House's reasoning on this is to increase that equality, that thing that we've been talking about for the last 10 to 20 years now, and also to potentially double the Selective Service pool if it ever was needed. Which is pretty significant, right? So now if there ever was a draft, we would have double the numbers to pull from to cover down. By using available federal databases, the Selective Service Agency will be able to register all the individuals required and thus help ensure that any future military draft is fair and equitable. This will allow us to rededicate resources, basically that means money, towards readiness and towards mobilization, rather than towards education and advertising campaigns driven to register people. So again, they're anticipating that they'll save a lot of money if they make this an automatic thing. So now most of these headlines are pretty misleading. Okay, we've talked about this before. This is all just the House's version of the 2025 NDAA. Now the Senate also gets a vote in the 2025 NDAA, and their version, their draft version, doesn't include any verbiage like this. The National Defense Authorization Act is a must-pass bill, right? It has to get approved no matter what, every year. But it has to get hashed out appropriately, and everybody has to agree upon the contents before it actually goes up to the White House for signature. And even once it gets that far, if the president doesn't like what they see, they can always kick it back. So what the headlines are being now, they're really exploiting the House's version of the 2025 NDAA. And they're not really talking too much about the Senate's version because they know for a fact that once the Senate sees what the House has put forth for their version of the NDAA, a lot of it's going to get kicked back. Right now, our House is controlled majority by Republicans, and the Senate is opposite. It's controlled majority by Democrats. Obviously, that in itself results in a lot of conflicting views, which is not necessarily a bad thing, right? Because we are a checks and balances system, so that is the nature of it. It's actually supposed to work that way. So even though in the House's version they want to have automatic registration of men and women to the Selective Service System age 18 to 26, that doesn't mean that that's actually what's going to happen. That's just what's going to be brought forth to the chambers, and then everybody's going to discuss it, and, you know, there's a pretty good chance that it won't happen, all right? They'll probably have to get kicked back and rewrite everything and come to some sort of arrangement, some sort of agreement between the House and the Senate before they send it up to the president for final signature. So even though you're seeing all over all these different headlines, all over social media, that they're bringing the draft back, oh my God, unbelievable, we're getting ready for war, all these things, it's not necessarily the case, all right? They're just sort of exploiting the verbiage that has been approved in the House's version of the NDAA, but it's nowhere near complete and finalized. There's still a lot more wickets to get through before we see an official 2025 National Defense Authorization Act signed by the president. And even then, guys, if it did get approved as written, as is written by the House, it just means that the Selective Service registration is now going to be automatic. It's not something that the younger generation is going to have to worry about, or at least nothing new that they have to worry about, right? I mean, this, like I said, this has been going on for the last 50 or so years. But the big change definitely would be that now women are added into that pool and they will be automatically registered as well. Now, that's a pretty big subject, right? I'm curious what you guys think about that. Do you think that that is a move in the positive direction? Do you think we should do that? Do you think women should be part of the draft if there ever was a draft in the future? Or do you think that's the wrong answer and it's the wrong way to go? I'm really curious what you think. Drop that in the comments for us. Now, real quick, I'm just going to break it down for you so that you have an understanding of this, what the Selective Service System really is and how it would work if it was ever called in for use. Here is the Selective Service System website. It's their official website. By the way, I will drop links to all these resources in the description for you to go check out yourself if you feel so inclined to do so. Definitely recommend that you do so you have the knowledge for yourself. Here is an overview of the Selective Service System lottery, right? Okay, so it's a lottery-based system. If we do find ourselves as a country needing to implement a draft, because obviously we found ourselves in World War III or something like that, this is how it would go down. If Congress and the President were to reinstate a military draft, the Selective Service System would conduct a national draft lottery to determine the order in which young men would be drafted. The lottery would establish the priority of call based on the birth dates of registrants. The first men drafted would be those turning age 20 during the calendar year of the lottery. For example, if a draft were held in 2020, those men born in 2000 would be considered first. Men turning 21 in the year of the draft would be considered second priority, men turning 22 would be third, and so on until a man turns 26, at which time he is over the age of liability. Younger men would not be called in that year until men in the 20 to 25 age group are called. So that's pretty important to know, right? And that's pretty interesting. So if there ever was a draft, we know that ages 18 and 19 would be considered last out of the 18 to 26-year-olds. And the first ones to be called up would be 20-year-olds. And then it'd be 21, 22, 23, 24, 25. Then it would recycle back to the 18 and 19-year-olds. And it really is a lottery, guys. There's actually more about how it works, and that they actually do draw lottery balls with numbers on them from lottery ball air machines. And these machines are called the Titan lottery machines, apparently. And when this is conducted, when they actually draw lottery numbers, it's done in full view of observers, officials, and the media. So it's a pretty big deal. I'm not going to read the whole thing because it's kind of long and monotonous, but if you're interested in like breaking down exactly how it works, the lottery, definitely go check that out. Again, I'll drop it in the description for you guys. So it's pretty legit. It's pretty official. It's interesting that a draft is done through a lottery-based system like that, right? It's crazy the world we live in. It's like really weird to think about sometimes. But that's the real deal, guys, right? That's what's actually going on. It's not as big a deal as everybody on social media is making it sound. I know I'm on social media right now, but I'm here trying to tell you the truth of things. It's not as big a deal as what the news is saying. Again, this is just a very touchy subject, especially nowadays for Americans, and they know they're going to get the clicks and the hits if they make it sound like a draft is coming back. But that's just not the case, at least not for now. But again, I will say a pretty big move is adding women to the Selective Service System. That's a pretty big move. It's never happened before, I don't think. I'm pretty sure it's never happened before. So that would be a pretty big change, something to be added to the history books for our country for sure. Again, I'm very curious about how you guys feel on that one. I'm sure there's a lot of you out there with different viewpoints, but valid viewpoints for sure. I've been paying pretty good attention to world events and really keeping my eye on moves that are being made overseas, internationally, mainly because it has drastic effects on me as a soldier if anything ever did go down. I would encourage all of you out there, especially if you are in the military, to make sure that you're definitely paying attention to the news and get your news from multiple different sources, okay? Don't just rely on one source. A lot of them are just one-sided. The more sources you have, the better, because it gives you a holistic view on what's really going on in the world. And it gives you the ammunition that's required to actually come to an educated conclusion for yourself. A lot of sources out there exploit the natural tendency of humans to jump to conclusions. So just try not to be one of those statistics, all right? Do your research, it's important. I'm not old enough to say that I've lived or have any experience with a draft, obviously, but I definitely have my own thoughts on that particular subject. I think it's important as a nation to have some sort of backup system for just in case scenarios. Definitely don't think that just day-to-day conscription is the right answer, because I think there's definitely something to be said about an all-volunteer force. I do think that having an all-volunteer force gives us strength. I think it's more of a strength than it is a weakness. That's just my thoughts. And I know that we're struggling with recruitment and retention. I know we have issues right now, but I still think that if we are able to pull off an all-volunteer force and we are able to maintain that appropriately in order to defend the interests of our nation, that's what we should do. But we definitely should have a fallback in case that does fail, right? And so that's kind of what this, at least that's what I think, the Selective Service System is meant to be. It's really just an emergency break glass when needed solution to if there really was the need. You never know, guys, with the way the world is today. I mean, the worst case scenario could potentially happen, and we could lose a lot of people very quickly, especially within our armed forces. And if our armed forces were attrited so drastically that we were no longer capable of defending our nation, what is it that we do at that point, right? You're going to have to find fighters from somewhere. But I'm no politician, right? Definitely don't have all the answers on this side. I will never say that I know what's best at any given time, but I do like to have fruitful debates, and I do like to have conversations and try to come up with a collective decision based on everybody's different inputs. I think that's really important. So if there's anything that you want to drop into the ether, you think it's important to get off your chest, and you think it's beneficial for the rest of us to see, please drop that in the comments, all right? I like to use these videos to spark conversation like that and hopefully develop positive solutions, right? Stay safe out there. Make sure you're doing your proper research. Besides that, I will see you on the next one.